When I came home, my brain told me my children would be better off with a dead mother than a live one. So I took all the medications that I had and I attempted suicide. That was really the catalyst to then I like dug. It was Kerry 2.0. I'm not doing that again. I'm getting better.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment, and thank you so much. It is my honor to welcome our guests because they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive. Their time, 24 hours has been offered to each and every one of us. And what we do with that 24 hours, I keep telling people, well, tell me who you are truly. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful created Carrie, and it gave her some stuff that we want access to. And in order for us to give us access to that, she has to become vulnerable. And so we want to honor her and say to her, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be vulnerable and let my femininity shine. I appreciate
It's an honor to have you. As I said, one of our custom here is to ask this question that I throw at everyone. I start really, some people said that's a tough question to start. And to me, it's very simple. My question leads to as I said, that servanthood of who we are as a result of our journey. And my question to you is, how do you serve mankind?
How do I serve mankind is teaching mankind what is healthy femininity. That was what my enlightenment experiences were about last year, is that I need to value my ability to create human life, and I need to value my ability to be healthy in my femininity that fuels healthy masculinity. And because I didn't value that my whole life, I ran into a lot of challenges. So now is my time to share my wisdom on that front.
Yeah, it's that piece that I tell people, that journey, that piece that we were traumatized with back in the day when we were young. That's the thing that will usher you and I to where we should be. One of our spaces is to go back into the beginning. I always say the beginning of our beginnings. And this is the family unit. We're going to learn a couple of skills there. I always say to people, the communication skills we're going to learn there, belief, we're going to start developing that. Behavior patterns going to start there. Our mindset, limiting beliefs begins there. Trauma begins there. A wonderful place to start, if you will. What was your family unit like?
Trauma. Yeah. My dad's parents divorced in the 50s, and then my grandma got pregnant with another man's child, and they got back together. My grandma used to put on my youngest uncle's shoes and feed him in a recliner when he was in high school. Like, that's how codependent she was with him, as an example of the challenges in that family. Now, my grandpa was very successful, but that's kind of, I have a Swiss German last name. And if you get a Swiss German watch, it's perfect, right? But that comes with a lot of hard work.
Yeah,
So I come from,
perfection.
a line of engineers, extremely hardworking, workaholic men.
Yeah,
Okay. That's the men in my family. And then my mom. Okay. Well, my mom was engaged 4 times.
wow.
And my mom is 4 years older than my dad, and they married in the 60s. So that kind of shows you how anxious she was, very anxious attachment style. And, modeled by my grandmother, who got pregnant when she was 16, gave birth to her first daughter, and then had my great grandmother raise her. And so my mom didn't know that she had a sister, that she was her half sister, until after my grandma passed away and she was in her 80s. So,
Wow.
I came from a lot of generational trauma. And I was born in Scottsdale, Arizona. And when I was 9 months old, my dad got a job as an engineer in France and Switzerland. So we moved there for about 4 years. And then we moved to Southern California, about 15 minutes from where the Bachelor Mansion is now. The show on ABC, The Bachelor, just
Hmm.
to show you the affluence that I was raised around. Like, you don't get more affluent around Malibu or the surrounding, you know what I mean? Like, so, community that's like extremely affluent area. So my parents got divorced at the end of my kindergarten year. And so we moved out of our huge home, and then I moved into an apartment. And my dad still had a lot of money, but then my parents would argue about child support in front of me. And a couple years ago, I had a conversation about that with my brother, and like, I just turned 55. And he said, He said, "That didn't really affect me that much. I thought they were being stupid." I said, "Right. Well, you're a boy, so you're gonna provide for yourself. Dad was arguing about providing for me, and I'm a girl. I'm gonna internalize that differently." And
Yeah.
I internalized that as that I don't deserve, because I'm not good enough, for a man to provide for me. So you can couple that with society's, just screaming at women and, "You don't need a man, you don't need a man, you don't need a man. Go to college, do everything on your own. Be a mother, get a PhD, do it all, Carrie."
Yeah.
And where's the time to take care of Carrie? There is no time for that. So that's the environment I was raised in. And I'm a newly published author. And the author, I talk about the men I attracted into my life, my heroes. And I call them my heroes because they mirrored my wounds back to me. And the
Hmm.
first one came from my childhood. And I call him Jared in the book. And we were together at high school, and that was really traumatizing to me as well, and I didn't realize how much pain I had buried because I couldn't be with him inside of me, and that all of those wounds are what drove my life, and as a shaman, and in going through my own healing journey over the last 10 years, I came to realize, and listening to psychologists and neuroscientists and physicists and mystics, and I have a
Yeah.
master's degree in East Asian religious studies, like, just bring it all. And so, yeah, that's kind of like where it all started, and I went about life, with those wounds. I didn't realize I had them until last November and December when I addressed them, and so that's kind of what started me. Like, that's how I launched into adulthood, was with all that.
Wow. I'm fascinated about this young girl, this individual
Yeah.
growing amongst all of that wonderful cauldron of intense trauma, if you will.
Yeah, challenge,
And
yeah.
she is driven towards spirituality.
Right.
What was Carrie, how was she showing up as a young individual amongst all of that? What caused, and I know some of the pain and the trauma can cause and causes one to drift to the other world, if you will, in order to cope with all of the trauma that they did. What was your situation? What drove you towards the spiritual part of life, if you will?
Well, so I didn't really like high school, or because it was all just memorizing and regurgitating. Like, that wasn't stimulating for me. I
Yeah.
need a lot of, like, I'm very perceptive, and I'm a huge analyst, and I have a very much an engineering left brain and a highly intuitive right brain. So I need, like, intensity. And so when I went to college, I'm like, okay, I want to help people. And so what about a speech therapist? So I thought, okay, I'll do speech therapy. And when I got to University of California at Santa Barbara, UCSB, as a junior to be a speech therapist, I needed to do more, like, just general education. And one what was available was the history of Zen Buddhism. And I'd been interested in, like, psychic gifts and spirituality from my mom, who was into that. And so I'm like, "Okay, I'll take this class." But what drew me to the class was the level of analysis and
Hmm.
critical thinking. I mean, that just put me on fire. I'm like, "We're gonna talk about politics and history and culture and society and, like, religion and spirituality all in one place?" I'm like, "Let's go," right? And then I get to learn languages. Oh,
Yeah.
like, loved it. Like, my dad had to learn French, and he learned like that. Like, both of my parents are very much oral learners. Like, they both really good dancers. My grandma on my mom's side and my uncle can play piano by ear. Like, we just have those oral gifts. So, so I started studying Chinese. I did Chinese intensity, like, 1 year and 12 weeks the next summer, and then I did 2nd year Chinese, and then 1992, I studied abroad in China. Like, I just ate it up. I
Yeah.
loved it. So, it lit me on fire. And so that's, it's part of my soul's purpose,
Hmm.
is to get a master's degree in East Asian religious studies, meet my ex-husband in Tibet, and he's Israeli. We had our first kiss at the Mount Everest base camp in a Buddhist monastery, Like, I've done some things, but that's the level of challenge that my soul needs to have opportunities for growth, and that's what, now I've learned. But that's how I got started in there, and then, I went to Israel, and I taught English and came back to graduate school, and then I applied for a PhD. but they didn't let me in. And I had considered, what I had wanted to do was study with the nuns. And I had talked to my professor about doing that. He's like, yeah, get at that wisdom that they have. I know they have wisdom. Well, what no one taught me is the wisdom they have in their hearts is also in my heart. And that's
Yeah.
where I found it. And I experienced enlightenment, outside of academia on my own, didn't know it was coming, but my soul had a plan for me to experience enlightenment. And so that was part of my learning process. And like, no one taught me that enlightenment's an emotion. Like, I lived in Chinese Buddhist monasteries, like, translated classical Chinese texts from, into English. Like, I was in it, right? And I only learned that enlightenment is part of our healthy emotional range on my own through my own research last year. And my son's 27 now. Like, but that's life. Like, that's how I had to learn. That was my soul's plan to teach me these valuable, valuable lessons that I can now share with the collective.
So let me ask you a question. Here you are with all of this spiritual knowledge, if you will, studying because, studying Zen Buddhism, all the different things. I mean, you're just drinking it up. And Carrie did nothing. It didn't penetrate.
It
How
didn't.
did that happen?
So this is the thing, like, I translated 12th century Taoist texts written by men about pregnancy, childbirth, and menstruation. Like, I was trying to access my femininity through texts written 1,000 years ago by men. Like, that's how disconnected from myself I was. I mean, that's how I
Hmm.
see it. So, about a month ago, I saw this statue and it just spoke to me. It's called something like Grief. It's about a statue about a parent who's lost a child. And it shows the head, the arms, and the legs, but the whole center is gone. Like, just gone. That was me. One time I was about 5 or 6. Like, I may have met my guy from childhood at elementary school. We may have been like, because I always remember, like, I was never able to, like, have friendships. I was just, like, disconnected. I didn't know how to connect. And how do we connect? We connect through our heart. But I had just disavowed my heart because I had internalized other people's negativity, their own self-hate, my parents projecting their self-hate onto me, and I'm a child, so I don't know. So I just internalized that I'm the problem. And so if I'm the problem, then how do I, have relationships? And
It's a
so
powerful,
that was my challenge my whole life,
yeah,
is that I was just rejected myself. And in shamanism, they talk about rejected parts of self and recalled parts of self. And in psychology, they talk about codependencies. And I see that as the same thing.
yeah. As you are, here's this young girl. I mean, from the onset, you saw mom and dad arguing about child support, and the child support is you, about you.
Yeah.
And from that incident, you picked up, the fact that you must not be worth it and all of these different things, which is, yeah, that's traumatic to even see that
Yeah.
argument or to picture that. And then to have this young individual drink that in. And that was her perception of what she understood from the argument, which now is going to drive her all the way through as a young woman, all the way through. So here is this girl moving through life, not knowing who she is and not knowing that she's worthy and so forth, has been in Zen Buddhism, not doing anything, not reaching in again, nothing, nothing.
But it is. I mean, let me share a couple more things. Okay.
Good.
So this guy from who I called Jared in the book, my original hero from my childhood. I wrote a poem when I was 21, UCSB, and it was part of a Indian Buddhism class. I wrote about 10 different poems, and it was about him. It was all about, I could see that he didn't love himself and that I can't fill his cup of love. And I understood these concepts that just came out of my heart. So it's been like, it's in there when I open, and I did open at college some, and to pour it out of my heart. But like, this is how much I didn't value myself. So in high school, Jared, ASB president, multiple sport varsity letterman, over 6 feet tall, exceedingly good looking, dad's a surgeon, like guy that everyone would want, right? Who did I give my virginity to? A guy who dealt drugs when I was 16. And now, granted, Jared was gone at that point because he's 2 years older than me. But, I would just the fear just took over me. I wouldn't even let him talk to me. And granted, like, I saw psychologists say this, and in my own experiences, we're attracted to each other based on our wounds, and he tried really hard just to talk to me, and I wouldn't even let him talk to me, and he was conservative. I knew I wasn't. Like, I knew why it couldn't be. But that is, I didn't know how to be healthy in my feminine lane. I didn't know how to, you know, this is what I learned from the fifth hero, the fire captain. A man will open his heart to a woman when her love is stronger than his brute. And I didn't love myself enough for my love to be stronger than Jared's brute. I didn't know how to do that at 14, 15 years old. I was like, which, is normal, is clueless. But for me, he was like climbing the Mount Everest of romance, and I was ill prepared due to my childhood trauma. But he has a degree from a military academy, he has an MBA, he was with the, FBI, high very, very successful man. So it's, not that there and I had to not have regret over that because those are my lessons. All that was necessary for me to experience enlightenment several times last year, face my fear of men, face my fear of being sexually assaulted. And so I had to learn these lessons that our souls how do our souls plan our lives? Like, why do we need all this pain? Like, why is this necessary? And this is how I bring in the laws of physics. It's one of the pieces of wisdom that I rely on like every day. Okay. So there's these two balls and they're identical and they're on two tracks. They're the same distance. One is slightly downhill and one has hills and valleys. So on that track, technically the distance traveled is longer. Which ball wins?
Which ball wins?
What do you think? Physics totally based on laws of physics.
Yeah, this one wins.
Yes, and since our souls are energy bodies, and
Hmm.
physicists have proven we all have energy bodies, we're all connected through our heart, so our souls plan our lives based upon the laws of physics, and this is surfing the waves of life, going up and down those valleys. The momentum and propulsion gained from going
Going
downhill
down and
is
up.
what leads us to the next hill. And so I'm like, every time I'm in the valley, I'm like, "Ugh, okay, fine. It's like getting me ready, fine, I'll do it. Fine. But, we complain about that, especially women, a lot of women don't understand that we are designed to be the emotional center. We as women experience 75% more negative emotions than men. And we are the ones that need to be like experts at this shadow work. Like self reflection is feminine. Diving into our emotions and women being the emotional center and women being source energy and connected to source, this is our role. And I really had to learn that. And so one of the quotes I have in the book is a Cherokee proverb. And it says that a woman's highest calling is to connect a man to his soul so he can
Yeah,
unite with source. A man's highest calling is to protect a woman so she can walk the earth unharmed. And I had to learn that. I mean, I learn and learn and learn, like, what is healthy femininity? And that just encapsulates it, completely encapsulates it for me. And now I understand myself.
yeah. So here, let's make that jump. Let's go into, because I tell people we dabble with things as you are in the Zen world and so forth, and things are being, I was just laughing it's being planted. It's just not being used yet, but it's there. And you made a statement that some of it showed up in your writings and so forth, but it's there. And
Yeah.
it's planted for the right season, if you will. So talk to us as to, I call most of our life happens, we just drift along. And then we drift along, Carrie, until that day when all hell breaks loose. Talk to us
Mm.
as to the day, what caused, and this is always a series of things, but it culminates on that day when everything is just, the whole wheels come off, as they say. Talk to us
Mhm.
about that day. What was it that came off? How did it come off? And where happened to you at that moment?
Well, I'll just say my 40s were a shit show,
If you put
which
it
I
that
think
way.
a lot of people understand. When I hit my 40s, my hormones, my kids, everything was, I was getting 4 to 7 migraines per week. I was on trazodone, Klonopin,
Wow.
Soma, Ambien. I wasn't sleeping. I had anxiety. I had depression. I had no relationship. I barely had any friends. I was negative constantly. So when my mom passed away on my 45th birthday, my intuition told me that I need to accept my psychic gifts and I need to heal from my childhood trauma, and that's when I had to start learning how to surf the waves of life, had to just accept that I'm in the ball experiment, and I'm going up my hills and down my valleys, and I have to learn how to surf the waves of life. My parents never did, they just tried to stay on top, even though they were actually in the bottom because they didn't understand themselves. So that's how that happened, like, that was the catalyst.
That was a catalyst that caused you to make that statement. Now, once you made that statement, what where did you go for the data to get that knowledge as to surfing the wave and stuff like that? What did that look like? Where did you, after that encounter and that revelation, where did you go?
I went to a spiritual healer, like someone who practices Reiki, who's a shaman.
Hmm.
And then about a year later, someone gave me a phone number of another shaman that was here locally that I worked with for several years. So that's where I went to. And then I learned Reiki. So I'm a Reiki master, I'm a Karuna Reiki master. And then on my own, I started looking at psychology and different things came, along the way. So my soul would show me the right things at the right time. But the basis was the wisdom and the spirituality for sure.
And so when you started doing that, Carrie, and you started getting the revelation as to some of the traumas that you embraced as a young individual, what did you started to see? What were some of those traumas that you started to notice and were brought to your attention? And what tools did you bring in to help you to manage to move through it, if you will?
Okay, I don't remember details about those first 4 years because I was just when you learn to surf, you stay in those little waves and
Hmm.
hills for a while until you learn to surf. So, I didn't do anything big then. But what happened was 6 years ago, my youngest daughter, who has an eating disorder, blamed me for her eating disorder, and that was in April of 2019. And, when I came home, my brain told me my children would be better off with a dead mother than a live one, so I took all the medications that I had and I attempted suicide. That was really the catalyst to then I, like, dug it was Carrie 2.0. I'm not doing that again. I'm getting better, and I told my older daughter who found me the next morning, she was 18 at the time, that I'm bringing healing to the whole family, and we're not leaving her dad behind. And I even had opportunities to heal people and reveal my healing gifts in the psych ward. Like, it just started coming out of me, the self-belief and the self-confidence and the psychic gifts. It was like, I needed to disconnect from myself so much to come back reborn and to like go that deep into my shadow to bring that wisdom with me that I call soul logic. Like, soul logic is hurt people hurt people. The universe is a mirror. Triggers are our healing friend, not our healing foe. That's what I kind of call soul logic, like how souls work and how we operate and how we're souls having a human experience. So that's really how so after that, then I did 4 medicine journeys, and the first one was showing me how many souls were lined up to be my children in this lifetime,
Hmm.
to show me, how loved and valued I am because
Yeah.
I didn't love and value myself, and the universe is a mirror to
Hmm.
my heart, right?
Yeah.
Then I thought nobody else valued me either, right? Because it's all a reflection. Our external reality is a reflection of our internal reality and how we feel about ourselves. So that's when all that started changing. And then the next medicine journey, I could see that I don't love myself. And when I came home, I asked my son, do you love yourself? He's like, no. I'm like, do you feel my love? He's like, no. I said, so now I'm gonna start asking you every day, what can I do today so you feel my love? And I started asking all 3 of my kids every day. And that's really like got it going like big time and really making
Yeah.
it huge leaps and bounds. And then in October of 2019 is the first time I met Tim, my first hero. We had a brief conversation, and then I started talking to him a year later at yoga. But all these guys, I've never been on a date with any of these guys. And all
Hmm.
these guys are what we call players. They have, they're men who exercise their options with women, so to speak. And one reason that I attract them into my life, because we attract people based upon our wounds, is I had a wound that I'm replaceable. Obviously I'm not, no one's replaceable, but I saw a guy who has a successful business speak on YouTube yesterday. He's like, well, I can always get another wife. I can't get another business. Like they're all replaceable. Like, oh, that would be, previous to my healing, he would have been a perfect counterbalance to me, right? So, one reason, no sex, no dating is to show the value of femininity in my book, that I could pull all this wisdom out of me, and you never even took me on a date. And you're telling me that I'm only valuable to cook, clean, and have sex? Like, no. So, because, it's just the time hasn't been there yet for us to see how valuable femininity is, that femininity fuels healthy masculinity. If I go outside in an elegant dress, dress modestly, beautifully, and I'm respectful of men, then I'm much more likely to get the door open for me, to get asked out, to get my bags carried for me, and to get healthy masculine help. But if I go out there all masculine, dressed all, boobs out and, whatever, I'm going to get a whole other response from men, and women aren't taking accountability for that. Well, men should. Okay, well, let's talk about what women need to do. Get rid of the should, and let's talk about what is your job, because you'll see women on podcast after podcast. Well, men provide and protect. Well, what do you do? Well, whatever I want. Well, what do you bring to the table? Well, I'm beautiful. You have a womb, right? You're supposed to be giving birth to kids, right? Like, but society's teaching us this. And I learned this in high school in the 80s. Get it, go
Yeah.
to college, get a career, have kids later.
Hmm.
That's the male roadmap, not the female roadmap. And so, I go into all that in the book about how feminism and sexual promiscuity destroys women and women's ability to pair bond as mothers and children. And there's two firefighters in the book. I put them all in a lineup with Andrew Tate, right? Like
Yeah.
my second and third heroes are Justin Waller and Andrew Tate. And then there's two Fire Academy instructors, both decorated. And then an FBI agent who's currently the head of global security at a major international company that everybody would know that deals with the internet. And all these men have similar wounds to Andrew Tate, but everybody's hating on Andrew. And all the women want to marry and date these men, but then everybody's hating on Andrew. I'm like, hang on a second. I'm not judge or jury on Andrew. Did he hurt
Yeah.
women? That's not my job. Okay. Not my job. Not my job, but this is what we're not talking about in my final thoughts in the book. I started with a Winston Churchill quote. And Winston said, "It is said that famous men are often the product of an unhappy childhood." I'm like, okay, there's the two ball experiment, and there's the men in my life. All of them. Unhappy childhood, but that deep valley of darkness gave them the momentum and propulsion. Like, if you're going to be the 4-time UFC world champion, you have to been, seen and done some stuff. Like, if you want to get to the top of Mount Everest, that valley of darkness to get there is deep, dark, and difficult. But I see like enlightenment is like that, and that it's an emotion, but you got to have like a reason to get there. I had a reason to get there. I had so much pain. I couldn't really have friends or relationships. And so I had all of that to propel me to do the work to open up my emotional range as such. But it takes a lot of work to open up one's emotional range to include enlightenment. It's not
And once
easy.
you did that, Carrie, and you began to open up your emotional range, as you said, and you are getting acquainted with your feminism, as you state. What did you notice about you as to why you lost it? And what did you notice about you as you began to own it, if you will?
So when I didn't have my femininity, I didn't know how to forgive people, and we're all human, so we all make mistakes. I didn't know how to have compassion for myself or others. I mean, I was the problem. So I was busy appeasing others to make up for me being the problem. But that's, that's all my trauma. I was never the problem, so to speak. I'm a human being having a human experience,
Hmm.
but those were all of my debilitating, extremely self-hating beliefs buried in my subconscious. I didn't know they were in there until, the last 10 years, and then getting them out was, extremely difficult, but, I gained so much wisdom in the process, and I understand now, like, the wisdom that says, even the box of emotional pain he left me with was a gift. What's the gift? The process of learning how to transform those emotional wounds into personal wisdom In 2021, I saw that I had a wound that I feared all men. Now, I didn't know it was in there, but when I found it and I transformed it into wisdom that men protect me, when I went out in society the next day, my anxiety was gone and I wasn't afraid of half the population. And my older daughter, that I went to visit her at her market, she noticed instantly that I was far less anxious. And it
Hmm.
was like I was in a whole new world because I had transformed that one wound into wisdom. And so that's the power. And so our emotions are expressions of our soul. And so because they can, they can measure that we have energy bodies, they can measure the frequency those energy bodies are emitting. And so they measure the frequency of emotions. Shame is like 20 hertz, anger is like 80 hertz, love is about 200 hertz, compassion about 400, enlightenment is 700 to 1,000 hertz. The higher vibrating the energy, based on the laws of physics, the higher the energy vibrates, the more powerful, the more transformative it is. And that's why love will always win in the long run over hate. In the long run, you can hold
Always.
on for a while, but in the long run, love will always win. And part of my story are these men like Andrew Tate and Justin Waller, and they're in the red pill community online. The red hot center of the red pill community online is Fresh and Fit. That podcast, they have like over 1 million subscribers, and they really promote that high value men, meaning men with a lot of money, deserve multiple women. Okay. That is part, they do a lot of good. They help with men's mental health. They talk about how to make money and how to invest and do all these things. But this is the one sticking point that I have with them is that, that polygamy is what's best. And that's not what I see as a mother, with
Yeah.
children. That, how can you create a healthy nuclear family, which is the bedrock of a stable society with one man and multiple women? That's not a healthy nuclear family. The woman is a center, the emotional center, energetically based on the laws of physics. The man goes out of the house to provide and protect. He orbits with providing and provisioning, so she's the center. But when you have one man, multiple women, he can't, based on the laws of physics, one orbiter around multiple centers, that's out of balance in terms of the laws of physics. Additionally, we know that that just doesn't work. They're just not, each woman and all those children will not get the time and attention from the father in order to develop a secure attachment to self, which is connecting someone to their soul. So that model sets us up in the long term for failure. And then also a lot of men don't have wives. And so then they're not getting sex. And so then that's prime for social upheaval. I in 2023, that podcast, Fresh and Fit, was demonetized. The morning that they were demonetized, I was meditating and I asked the universe the same question. How could one man, multiple women create a healthy nuclear family? Like, how can this work? And the universe said it doesn't work in the long run because monogamy is the path to enlightenment. So I downloaded that into my soul. And then my soul sent it to Andrew Tate. And then Andrew Tate sent it to Justin Waller. And then I'm watching YouTube 2 hours later and Fresh and Fit was demonetized. And this is kind of the lesson that we all need to learn, that when we love ourselves, we will come into alignment with what's best for us, whether we agree with the wisdom or not. I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't decide personally that monogamy is more wise than polygamy. I didn't decide that.
Yeah.
I download, okay, what's the wisdom and let me align with that.
Hmm.
I'm not over
Yeah.
here deciding things.
Yeah.
But this is where women have influence. Like, I couldn't go up to these men and say, "Oh, well, I don't think you should be sleeping with multiple women." Okay, go away. They never talk to me again. I would have no chance. The only chance I have is to open their heart, help them become more emotionally balanced, heal from their maternal wounds, which are severe. Like, Justin's mom has a YouTube channel talking crap about him, giving out her phone number so people can call her to talk more crap about him. That's how hurt he is by his mom. So it makes sense that he has a hard time letting women in when his
Yeah.
mom treats him still to this day as such. So we all need healing, and these men at the top that are role models, they really need healing, and they need an opportunity to speak and to see themselves. And that's what I'm doing is holding these men's feet to the fire, saying, you need to heal, and you need to talk amongst yourselves, and you need to talk to the collective, because everyone looks up to you. So, I'm like, how it used to be that the mom has to come out of the house to handle some business, like
Yeah.
back up. That's me right now.
So here you are, and you're able to, as you said, align yourself with the wisdom as you receive it. Talk to us as to how did it affect you? What did falling in love with you look like becoming
Mhm.
familiar with your femininity, but you have to learn how to, once you're familiar with it, you still have to accept it. It has to become a part of you. You have to digest it. You have to, allow it to get in, as you said, uncover things,
Mm.
bring them out in the open, learn to forgive self, learn to love, learn to honor, learn to all of those different things. What did that look like to you in your life? How did you fall in love with you as you're beginning to get all of this data, if you will?
Well, I would say that the falling in love with me really started happening, like, more intensely during those medicine journeys, and after I started talking to Tim routinely. During our first longer conversation, I had 35 years of debilitating lower back pain that started when I was 15,
Yeah.
high school.
Wow.
And, like, I had a hard time cleaning and cooking and exercising, like, debilitating lower back pain, but a lot of women these days have pain in their hips, and that's why we see so many somatic exercises advertised on Instagram to release the pain and, do the hip exercises and cry. That's basically addressing the pain in the hips. We store our pain where we store our value, and women, we have our value around reproduction in our hips. Um that was just huge because my shamanic gifts just started coming out. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can do this, and I can do this, and this is happening, and I can do that." And so it was like I was being shown so many parts of myself, but also, like, our connection was special. Like, 3 weeks after we started talking, we were out in the parking lot talking at night, and then all of a sudden, his soul, like, lit up 2 or 3 feet out from him, and he's over 6 feet tall, and then my soul lit up the same way. We're just like I think we never talked about it because it was just so, like, fantastical,
Hmm.
and we didn't expect it. We got in our cars, like, "See you next time," like, "Oh my god, what just happened?"
Yeah.
But that's how special our relationship was and how much, like, we didn't need to be, like, talking to be helping each other, and I think that women think men need to talk. Men act, they don't need to talk like we need to talk. It's not
Yeah.
the same thing. But, what really helped me was that fall, I had to accept that femininity is uncertain, and that I'm attracted to the uncertainty, and that masculinity is certain. So I'm not attracted to the uncertainty. Femininity is uncertain, I'm attracted to the masculine certainty, and they're attracted to our uncertainty,
Yeah.
right? But I spent my whole life being certain, being in charge of my marriage, being in charge as a kid, just that's the only way I felt safe, so I had to kind of feel comfortable in a whole new construct of what is safety, and
Hmm.
what really helped me is that when Tim and I would try to text her that we would just fight.
Yeah.
So I started texting him again at about 3 months, and he would just listen to me. And we were practicing because as a woman, I need to be able to speak without attack. I need to be able to communicate my emotions without attacking with my emotions. And that gave me plenty of opportunity to do that because he wasn't talking back. So if he's not talking back, then who am I arguing with?
Yeah.
Myself.
Yeah.
But then he was practicing holding space for me and just listening. Because men get caught up on the other side where I'm just gonna tell her what to do, and they don't realize that as women, we're different from men. Women, like, I need to be able to see myself clearly, and that's the point of me talking is to get all this out so that I can go, "Oh, that's how it is." Like, I'll see a problem back here, then I gotta talk about it, make all the connections because women connect and men disconnect, and then I can see clearly. So women don't, in general, need men to tell them what to do, how to be a woman. We need men to hold space that we can get all of our stuff out, make all these connections, and then see clearly for ourselves. Yeah, and I think that's a struggle that men and women have, but that just this surrendering to that process and
Hmm.
surrendering to my intuition that I thought was telling me to do crazy, stupid stuff that would never
Yeah.
work, but it worked every time, you know? But there's the uncertainty. I'm told what to do, and I'll find out why later. Like, I didn't know that reaching out to Justin was gonna, end up with me helping Andrew Tate, and I didn't know that Andrew Tate's soul would show me so many parts of myself, and I
Yeah.
would resonate with a man like that. Like, what? But I did. you know? And so my soul knows everything. And that's why I follow my intuition because my soul is a microcosm of the universe, which is a macrocosm. And my soul knows everything. What does Kerry know? The little bit of information I learned in this lifetime. Tiny, minuscule. It's okay. go do the crazy stuff, Carrie. And I have.
Yeah, the crazy stuff of where life is anyway. So here you are,
Yeah.
and you. How did all of this, Carrie, led to the book where you became vulnerable enough to allow the pages, if you will, to start to manifest as you're laying out all of your stories and your insight and your journey there? How did that come about?
So I kind of always felt like a book was coming. And, with
Uh-huh.
Andrew Tate, it's like, okay, there's probably a book. Like, he's really famous. And then two decorated fire academy instructors, like that's a book. So, and I'm also thinking, what's my next stage? Like, I know I'm a healer and I know I'm a healer's healer. I'm here to heal other healers so that
Yeah.
they can go out and heal the masses. So, like, if I can help Andrew Tate's heart be more balanced and he has access to millions of people, I just help millions of people. So, that's like my soul's plan is to be a healer's healer. So, okay, so sorry, can you get back to, you want me to
The
go
book.
to the book? Okay, so that happened. And then last year, after I experienced enlightenment, the fire captain told me he's married.
Nice.
Okay, even though, okay, granted, 3 weeks in, I saw his name and I looked him up, and on the community college website, because his fire academies are through community colleges, said clear as day he's married. I asked my intuition, do I stay? Keep going. I'm like, fine. See why, what, and then why later, right?
Yeah.
So this is the soul knows more than I know. Okay. And he even like seemed to have a relationship with a 30-year-old yoga instructor in between flirting with me. So after that, then I'm like, and then I started hearing words like, oath of office, dereliction of duty, dean of public safety. So the dean of public safety is his boss's boss, right? And firefighters take an oath of office to protect the most vulnerable. Well, casual sex hurts women tremendously and destroys their ability to pair bond as wives and mothers. And he's a good man. Like he's, a retired fire captain too out of East LA who oversees the wildland cadet program. That's a man who saved lives. I mean, in the book, you show I admire him tremendously, but we're all human and no one's perfect. And he, the Winston Churchill quote, most like, traumatic childhood, and he hasn't healed yet. So I wrote an email to the dean of public safety, kind of pointing all this out. Like, look, I was recently laid off. I have a strong mental health with challenges history, and here he is chasing me while married, and it's like two of them, and the other guy was like 14 years younger than me, and then he's having sex with yoga instructors who are married. But firefighters, like, there's 32 global studies showing that 57% of firefighters have PTSD. Well, why do they have PTSD? They don't know how to process their emotional pain. And there's also a ton of global studies showing that adults with PTSD all had traumatic childhoods. And the fire captain confirmed that. Yeah, most cadets have traumatic childhoods they haven't healed from. I'm like, okay, so how is the fire department taking responsibility for hiring out, young firefighters with unresolved childhood trauma and the negative impacts that has in the community? And you're giving them access to the most vulnerable, like wellness checks and women and children? And we don't think, and like, it's known the fire department deals with sex addiction. So it's a huge problem. So I would say, so that, like, I started writing with the letter, it took me 2 weeks to write that email. It was a long email. And then I did 2 more medicine journeys. And then last summer, the book just came out of my heart. I just started writing, and these are my rules that I can let everything out. But the end, I cannot disparage these men and I cannot speak for these men. So the whole book is about what I learned about myself and the whole healing process from this multidisciplinary approach that I used to understand, why I had so much pain and, why the hills and valleys and how all that works and how how the universe is a mirror, why triggers are our healing friend, not our healing foe, why it's important to be grateful for our challenges, how to process through our challenges, how our souls plan our lives based upon our wounds and our wisdom. And so I wrote the book last summer, and then I published my first edition, not being aware that I was going to reach out to Jared. Now, Jared came through my first enlightenment experience in March, but there was still so much unknown. I hadn't, still so much I didn't understand and know. And so then I reached out to him right before the election. And then I experienced enlightenment like several times, facing my fears and emotional pain that I had from that relationship. And then I added to the book and rewrote the book and got an editor to help me. And so then I published in April.
And guys, we're going to provide all of that information so you can get access to the book. And I always tell people, buy the books, get clubs, get friends, get a bunch of friends where you guys can read the book, meet at a certain time, get some lunch and or whatever, dinner and potluck, and discuss the book. So what did you learn? How are these different things? And so that you guys can get a better understanding of the vision within the book. And you get closer, if you will, and you're able to help each other as you're going through the book. And so we're going to provide you guys all the links for you to get to Kerry. Kerry, I have this question I want to throw at you. Here you are, you're an author, you do all the things that you're doing and learn so much wisdom. Um, and you have a mic in your hand. And that mic is connected to the 8 billion people that are here, a little more than that. What is that advice, would you say? What would that singular piece of advice would you give to us as individuals here from what you have gained through all of your studies, all of your insights about, you know, coming through pain, learning all these different modalities, all of it. What is it would you say to us?
Trust the process, trust your heart. As Rumi said, follow your heart, it knows the way. Our actual physical heart has far more neurons in our brain and sends far more signals from our brain, from our heart to our brain than the other way around. And our heart has the electromagnetic field is 5,000 times stronger than our brain. So listen to your heart,
Yeah,
especially when it hurts.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I said it's just listen to your heart. Your heart, I also mean like listen to your intuition, follow your internal guidance, and as Carl Jung says, where your fear is, there is your task. So if you have a fear, face it. Like I
Absolutely.
went down Everest Base Camp at 23. And I had that experience there. I just kept facing my fears and facing my fears and facing my fears. And now here I am, and I'm working on a film adaptation for my book at the major studio, and I'm getting traditionally published. And so it's a really exciting time for me
That is
because
awesome. I love it.
my heart, I followed my heart.
Guys, that's the best advice. Just sometimes you just need to be quiet and follow your heart and listen. The internal language, the internal compass resides there. And one of the things that you will know that will accompany you, even though you're stepping out, if you will, is you will have a peace about that particular thing. And that is all you can hang on to sometimes, that's all you got. And you step out and you jump. So we're going to provide all of the links. And we just want to thank Kerry for coming and allowing herself to be vulnerable before us and giving us such powerful insights. And we honor you and we thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much for having me and giving this opportunity to share. Every time I love it. I love sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.